Welcome to Sleep Stories. I am Riaan Roux, and I understand the struggle of not being able to fall asleep. With these stories, I hope to create a peaceful atmosphere to help you drift off into peaceful sleep. The following story is from Norse Popular Tales and is called Why the Sea is Salt. Original story by Sir George Webbe, Dasent. Modern story re-editing by Riaan Roux. A long, long time ago, there were two brothers, one rich and one poor. One Christmas Eve, the poor brother didn't have anything to eat. So he went to his rich brother and asked for some food to celebrate Christmas with. This wasn't the first time the poor brother had asked for help, and his rich brother wasn't too happy about it. But he still said, "If you will do what I ask you to do, I will give you a whole side of bacon." The poor brother was so happy and grateful that he agreed to do anything. The rich brother then handed him the side of bacon and said, "Now go straight to hell." "I have to stick to my word," said the poor brother. So he took the bacon and set out. He walked all day, and as the sun began to set, he came upon a place where he saw a very bright light. "Maybe this is the place," the man thought to himself. So he turned off the main path, and the first thing he saw was an old man with a long white beard, standing in a shed, chopping wood for his Christmas fire. "Good evening," said the man with the bacon. "Good evening to you too. Where are you headed so late?" asked the old man. "I'm trying to find my way to hell," replied the poor man. "Well, you're not too far off then. This is as close to hell as it gets," said the old man. "Once you're inside, everyone will want to buy your bacon, because meat is scarce here. But be careful. Don't sell it unless you get the hand crank mill that's behind the door in exchange. Once you come out, I'll teach you how to use it. It's good for grinding almost anything." So the man with the bacon thanked the old man for his advice and knocked loudly on the devil's door. When he entered, everything went just as the old man had said. All the demons, big and small, rushed towards him like ants around an anthill and tried to outbid each other for the bacon. "Well," said the man, "my wife and I were going to have this bacon for our Christmas dinner. But since you all want it so much, I guess I'll have to give it up. But if I do sell it, I'll only do it in exchange for that hand crank mill behind the door over there." At first, the devil refused to agree to such a deal and negotiated with the man. But the man stood firm, and finally the devil had to agree. When the man went out to the yard, he asked the old woodcutter how to use the hand crank mill. And after learning, he thanked the old man and quickly went home. But he didn't reach home until well after midnight on Christmas Eve. "Where on earth have you been?" said his wife. "I've been sitting here waiting for hours without even 2 sticks to make a fire for our Christmas porridge." "Oh," said the man, "I couldn't get back sooner. I had to go a long way for one thing, and then for another. But now you'll see what you'll see." So he placed the hand crank mill on the table and commanded it to first grind candles, then a tablecloth, meat, ale, and so on, until they had everything they needed for a delicious Christmas meal. He only had to say what he wanted, and the hand-crank mill produced it. His wife was in awe and kept asking where he got this magical mill, but he wouldn't tell her. It doesn't matter where it came from. The important thing is that it's a good one, and it never runs out of power. That's all that matters. So he ground enough food and drink and delicacies to last until the 12th day. And on the 3rd day, he invited all his friends and family to his house and threw a big feast. When his rich brother saw all that was on the table and all that was in the pantry, he became very jealous and angry because he couldn't stand the thought of his brother having more than him. "Just last Christmas Eve," he said to the others, "he was so poor that he came to me asking for a bite to eat. And now he's throwing a feast like he's a noble or a king." He turned to his brother and said, "But whence, in hell's name, have you got all this wealth?" "From behind the door," replied the owner of the hand-crank mill, because he didn't want to reveal where it came from. But later in the evening, after he had a bit too much to drink, he couldn't keep the secret any longer and showed off the hand-crank mill and said, "There, you see what's gotten me all this wealth." And he made the hand-crank mill grind all kinds of things. When his brother saw it, he became obsessed with owning it, and after a lot of persuading, he finally got it. But he had to pay $300 for it. His brother negotiated to keep it until the hay harvest, because he thought if he kept it until then, he could use it to grind enough meat and drink to last for years. So you can imagine the hand-crank mill never stopped working. When the hay harvest came, the rich brother got it, but his brother made sure not to tell him how to use it. It was evening when the rich brother brought the hand-crank mill home, and the next morning he told his wife to go out to the hayfield and work while the mowers cut the grass, and he would stay home and prepare dinner. As dinner time approached, he placed the hand-crank mill on the kitchen table and said, "Grind herrings and broth, and grind them quick and well." So the hand-crank mill began to grind herrings and broth. First it filled all the dishes, then all the tubs, and so on, until the kitchen floor was completely covered. The man twisted and turned the hand-crank mill to stop it, but despite his efforts, the hand-crank mill continued grinding, and the broth rose so high that the man was in danger of drowning. He threw open the kitchen door and ran into the living room, but it wasn't long before the hand-crank mill had filled the living room too. He was only able to open the front door by risking his life and diving through the stream of broth. When he opened the door, he ran out and down the road, with the stream of herrings and broth following him, roaring like a waterfall over the entire farm. His wife, who was in the hayfield, thought it was taking a long time for dinner, and finally said, "Well, even though the master doesn't call us home, we may as well go. Maybe he's having trouble boiling the broth, and will appreciate my help." The men were more than willing to do so, so they walked home leisurely. But just as they were walking up the hill, they met herrings, broth, and bread, all flowing together in a stream, and the master himself running in front of them for his life. As he passed them, he shouted, "I wish each of you had 100 throats, but watch out you don't drown in the broth." He ran off as if the devil himself was chasing him to his brother's house and begged him, for the love of God, to take back the hand-crank mill right away. "Because," he said, "if it grinds for even 1 more hour, the entire village will be drowned in herrings and broth." But his brother refused to take it back until he paid him an additional $300. So the poor brother ended up with both the money and the hand-crank mill. And it wasn't long before he built a farmhouse that was much finer than his brother's, using the hand-crank mill. He ground so much gold that he covered the entire farmhouse with gold plates. As the farm was located by the sea, the golden house shone brightly and could be seen from far away across the sea. Everyone who sailed by would stop to see the wealthy man in the golden house and to see the amazing hand-crank mill, whose fame spread far and wide, until there was no one who hadn't heard of it. One day, a sailor came to see the hand-crank mill, and the first thing he asked was if it could grind salt. "Grind salt?" said the owner. "Of course it can. It can grind anything." When the sailor heard this, he said he had to have the hand-crank mill, no matter the cost, because he thought if he had it, he wouldn't have to go on long voyages across the rough seas for a cargo of salt. At first, the owner of the hand-crank mill didn't want to part with it, but the sailor begged and pleaded so much that he finally agreed to sell it to him. But he had to pay many thousands of dollars for it. Once the sailor had the hand-crank mill on his back, he quickly left, fearing the owner might change his mind. He didn't have time to ask how to use the hand-crank mill, and quickly boarded his ship and set sail. Once he was a good distance away, he brought the hand-crank mill on the deck and said, "Grind salt, and grind it quickly and well." The hand-crank mill began to grind salt, so much that it poured out like water. Once the ship was full, the skipper tried to stop the hand-crank mill, but no matter how much he tried, it kept grinding on. The pile of salt grew higher and higher, and eventually the ship sank. The hand-crank mill still lies at the bottom of the sea and continues to grind salt to this very day. That's why the sea is salty.